Welcome to Up Close with Carlos Sang, celebrating art, entertainment, and the human spirit. Oli Higginson, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Carlos. Yeah, good to meet you. Thanks so much for having me.
It's so lovely to meet you as well. I first came across you in the last 5 years, and in between then and now, you've not done that many musicals. What was it about American Psycho that made you want to get involved?
Yeah, that's so true. I kind of always had my eye on American Psycho. I'd seen it when it was on probably 12 years ago or so. A friend of mine had randomly bought me a ticket to a preview, and I came out of that show thinking, oh my God, this is one of the best things I've ever seen. I was a massive fan of the book, massive fan of the film. And so I always thought, I wonder if they'll ever do that again. And so when the audition came along, I was like, well, I think this is going to be the perfect show for me to come back and do another musical. I think it's just such a great piece. I like more unconventional musicals, I suppose, and ones that have a kind of dark edge to them. So I guess that's American Psycho all over.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe it's been over 10 years since American Psycho was last on at the Almeida. And why do you think now feels like the right time to be doing the show again?
Oh gosh, there's probably a very bleak answer to that, which is about kind of cycles of capitalism and recession and political breakdown. And I suppose, what's interesting is that last time American Psycho was on, it was pre all of the social media, TikTok obsession, and our kind of obsession with how we look, how we present ourselves, the kind of public version of ourselves, the artificial kind of airbrushed version of ourselves that maybe papers over some of the cracks of our maybe kind of less sanitary thoughts and feelings, I think is really pertinent to now. And that's sort of what American Psycho is about. It's about how someone can be at the very top of power and money in a society that worships that, but on the inside can be completely broken. So I think, I do think we're at a point where we're struggling as a society with where we want to go and our relationship to money and power and image.
Yeah, I mean, the film and the book, it's so dark, it's so violent, it's so extreme. Why do you think at the same time it lends so well to being a musical too?
Yeah, I think it's the perfect source material for a musical. Obviously, there's partially the element that Patrick is obsessed with music of the 80s and early 90s, this kind of EDM movement that was happening in New York at the time, New Order and Huey Lewis and the News and these kind of bands. So Patrick sort of sees the world through music. So it's a no-brainer really that you'd turn that into a musical. And I just think the heightened nature of the show lends itself to this stylized kind of really like saccharine, sort of nasty, physical world, which again is like, it's perfect for a musical. I think it'd be very hard to do it as a play. So I think sometimes you get musicals out of source material that maybe you think, why is this a musical? But American Psycho, I think it's an absolute like surefire hit when it comes to musical theatre.
Yeah, I mean, the show is already, very sold out as it is. And what do you think it is about Duncan Sheik's music that makes it so infectious?
Duncan's obviously a great pop songwriter. All of his own personal solo music and his albums are fantastic, and so I think he brings a sort of pop edge to musical theatre songwriting that maybe isn't that common. He's maybe a bit less kind of reverential with the art form, which allows him to be informed by the source material a bit more and kind of shapeshift with what the source material is asking of him as a songwriter. I think, obviously, I know Duncan's a massive fan of basically the same music that Patrick is, so to sort of I have the same idols in the world of music is kind of helpful. But Duncan's a genius, and I was a massive fan of Spring Awakening. What's so cool is that this musical is sonically so different to Spring Awakening, and it's just awesome to see how someone can kind of flip a switch like that, which Duncan's very good at doing.
Yeah, this is your first time working at the Almeida as well. How's it been, working with Rupert Goold and his team there too?
Yeah, the creative team for this show is just kind of eye-wateringly brilliant. um, it's an amazing bunch of people. Ez Devlin designing, and Rupert and David Shrubsole, and just so many fantastic people involved. Lynn, choreographer Lynn Page, who I've wanted to work with for ages, and yeah, Rupert, he's so well versed at bringing something to the stage. It's just kind of a bit like, it's so effortless for him, and it's kind of amazing to watch him so easily steer the ship into the Almeida with American Psycho. So yeah, I love working with him. He's got such a sort of quick mind, and really forensic in terms of how he makes theatre. Like, there's like not a single second of the show that hasn't been meticulously thought out, and I think that's so exciting.
Yeah, I mean, Almeida is such an interesting space. It's so intimate, but also offers that epicness at the same time too.
Yeah.
Why do you think American Psycho sits so particularly well in that space as well?
Well, I think from a sort of performance perspective, there's something about American Psycho, the energy of it, which we've been talking about a lot in rehearsals. It's got this kind of, you come to me, I guess, kind of snarl and sort of attitude. So in too big a space, I think you might feel the kind of need to work that extra bit harder, and then you lose some of that kind of ease and that sense of sit back and listen to me. And so there is something cool about the Almeida space in that everyone's so close. You can hear everything, you can see everything. You can slightly take your foot off the gas with the performance element of it, which means you can exist in a slightly more truthful, laid back place, which is perfect for American Psycho. And this, I mean, I don't know how much of this is public knowledge, but this staging of the show is completely different to any staging there's ever been of American Psycho. We're doing it in a kind of thrust catwalk setting, which means the audience are going to be even closer, even more kind of thrust into the action. And then there's that lovely nod to like a fashion show in this kind of like very materialistic world. So I personally, I've never seen the Almeida looking like this. So anyone who's gone to see loads of Almeida shows, they're going to see the space completely transformed.
It's definitely exciting. What was it that attracted you to the part of Timothy Price as well?
Timothy Price, he's really, really clearly penned in the book by Bret Easton-Ellis, and it's fascinating because people might assume that Patrick is kind of the kind of alpha male of the group, but sort of what we've been discovering is that he kind of leaves all of his angst and violence to behind closed doors in the boardroom in Pierce and Pierce, where all these guys work. Tim Price actually is kind of on paper the kind of school bully who's risen to the top of this firm and throws his weight around, and there's something quite sadistic about him in the sense that he's actually very at ease with the sort of fucked upness of the world they're living in. It doesn't really trouble him that much. He doesn't really overthink it. He's up for having these cocaine-fueled nights out and then getting up for work the next day. He's, knee-deep in affairs. He kind of just accepts it and finds the whole thing like quite exciting and quite funny. So I like that about him. He's just really cynical and kind of just completely resistant to all the things that Patrick Bateman is struggling with, which is, why am I doing this? Why am I here? That nothing has any meaning. And Tim Price has this wonderful, I mean, I wish I could have a bit of Tim Price in me. Just kind of, it's water off a duck's back. It's like, yeah, so what? It's all worthless, but like, deal with it, get on with it, enjoy it while you can. So I sort of like that.
Yeah, I feel like the story and these characters is such an interesting exploration into masculinity and what it means to be a man today as well. Was there a lot in these characters in the story that you could connect to as well yourself?
Oh, absolutely. I was, definitely not the kind of alpha male of my peer group growing up, and I was into theatre and music and being sensitive. So a lot of these men, and a lot of I guess, you know, in London we have the same thing, and that's why I think it's so relatable. We have these waves of men who never really tackle their issues, the toxic issues going on that began in, you know, school locker rooms and corridors, and they've kind of just carried them on into government, into the city, into, you know, the most powerful halls of power in the world. And it's kind of disgusting to embody these people, but it's great to put them on stage because we all know what they're like and what they're capable of. And, you know, I guess the first route to tackling some of these toxic issues is putting them on stage and looking at them, examining them. So I think it's impossible to watch it and not feel like you know somebody who maybe carries themselves in this way, in this manner. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, given that we've had, I guess toxic masculinity since, over the last millennium, I guess, what do you think
Yeah.
this sort of like tells us about the human condition too?
Wow. Fascinating question. I mean, you know, I think obviously there's two ways of looking at it, isn't it? There's that kind of nihilist, you know, oh well, we're all kind of animals and we're all destined for the same type of behavior time and again. You know, men behave the same way, and I guess that, you know, to a degree, the show has a commentary on that in terms of the cyclical nature of these issues, and the story is set in late 80s, early 90s. You know, so like clearly not much has changed, but I think I like to think that certainly now we're in such a brilliantly questioning time when it comes to gender and identity and sexuality and, you know, what we want to do with our lives, what we want to spend our money on. You know, we're really like thinking about it and caring. And I hope we're a generation of empathy, and I believe that cycle can be broken, but it is difficult. And obviously everything's going on in America at the moment with Trump, and you know, it is hard to rail against these cycles of particularly male behavior, but I think it's doable, and that's why we do theatre, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Last autumn I got to come up to the RSC to see you do Measure for Measure,
Oh,
and
cool. Yeah, didn't you
so
you chatted with Isis? Did you? Did you chat with
I
Isis ahead?
did,
Yeah,
I did,
I
yes.
remember when
Yeah,
you
we did.
did that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
She
she's
said she had a
lovely.
great time. Yeah, she's
Ah,
amazing.
I love her. She's amazing. Yeah, something that I didn't know was that you actually played Angelo at Guildhall when you were studying. Was Measure for Measure a play that you'd always wanted to come back to, after doing that?
Absolutely. I think weirdly, much like American Psycho, you know, you grow up and there are certain plays or musicals that just like really are like a lightning bolt to your soul. And Measure for Measure, I did at drama school, as you say. I played Angelo, who's, you know, just this incredible part. And it became my favourite Shakespeare play. And I always said, when people were like, what Shakespeare would you like to do? I was like, well, I'd love to do Measure for Measure one day, but they never do it, you know, because it's so kind of challenging and difficult. So I was just like over the moon when that audition came in, and I was like, oh my God, RSC doing Measure for Measure. Emily Burns is doing it, who's,
Yeah.
you know, let's be honest, a kind of icon. And then to play Claudio, actually, who was a role that I'd, a lot of my drama school colleagues had played and had kind of explored during their time at Guildhall. I'd done Angelo, but a lot of people had done Claudio. And I'd always kind of been like, oh, I find Claudio a bit kind of, he's just a bit of a pushover, and he's a bit, you know, boring, and he's a bit wet and a bit pathetic. So it was amazing when I did get to speak with Emily for the first time, and all my concerns about the character, she had exactly the same thoughts, and she was like, this production, we're going to make him culpable, loud, dangerous, nasty, broken, tortured, violent. We're going to really like get inside this character and move away from any kind of romanticism or sentimentality with regards to his fate and, you know, his sentencing to death. So yeah, I was so glad to be able to come back to the Measure and to do it in such an incredible production.
Mm.
I mean, it was with incredible people. I mean, just a ridiculously talented cast, and it was one of my favorite jobs ever. It was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean Claudio. I mean your scene with Isis was incredible. When he's like in prison, I thought that was so
Oh,
immensely powerful. How did
thanks.
you go begin to go about preparing to play this character too?
Yeah, and I guess that's the beauty of Shakespeare sometimes. With something like American Psycho, we've got all these sort of, it's modern and you've got these political, social undertones. For me, like with Shakespeare and with this character in Measure, I just kind of sat there and was just like, you know what? The reality is, this is a young man who probably would be going into some of these high offices of power that we were just talking about, and he's been sort of curtailed by what he would consider as being like massively unfair draconian rules, and particularly like to clamp down on men for what has happened. But I was just kind of like, how would he be in this situation? And I honestly, like, the preparation for playing Claudio was really just imaginative. I just kind of thought, how would I be in that situation? How would this person be in that situation? And I think it is so shocking and it's so scary, for a young man who doesn't really have the emotional capacity to deal with the situation, that it would actually turn him into quite a nasty, not without judging him, but quite a sort of aggressive animal. And so I thought a lot about a kind of caged animal, someone who is so desperate to survive that they get in touch with the most unsanitary, dangerous, animalistic qualities, which 95% of the time we never see or we never get in touch with, except for maybe when we're, close to death. And so it was just about pushing that as far as possible to make it as extreme, as kind of technicolor and shocking as possible. And I guess that was where the beauty of, for those who didn't see it, the scene took place between either side of a giant perspex wall. And like the moment Emily brought that in, it meant that Claudio could be even more threatening, even more dangerous, because he was, facing this kind of physical obstacle. So there was no kind of necessarily no physical threat to Isabella in the scene, but there was this kind of opportunity for Claudio to just be as absolutely physical and violent as possible and throw his food at the wall and just scream his head off. And the other thing is, like, I really wanted, and I'm ranting on about this, but I found Claudio so interesting, but I really wanted to believe how scared he was, and like his pain and sadness and vulnerability, that someone can be both aggressive and a vulnerable, broken mess at the same time, and we can feel for someone and also be scared by them and kind of reviled by them all at the same time. So yeah, honestly, it was so brilliantly directed by Emily that I just was given free rein, as you saw, to kind of just be as much as I wanted, and thankfully it worked. And also Isis is incredible, that we basically just got to lock in to each other every night, and she's probably one of the best, if not the best, scene partner I've ever had in my entire life. It was just amazing. I relished working with her every single night. She's extraordinary.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I felt enormous empathy for Claudio, being in his situation. And I think you realize, how powerless, these characters are, in this sort of like corrupt world.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, was Shakespeare something that you really wanted to go back to? Of course, you won the Ian Charleson Award for Othello a few years back. Is that a skill that you've been wanting to explore more as well since?
Yeah, like, I as like I think hopefully my career choices somewhat speak for themselves, in that I love the variety of what an acting career can offer. I like kind of totally, doing totally different things. Going from Measure for Measure to American Psycho is kind of like my dream year for me, because I just like, flexing different muscles, feeling challenged. But Shakespeare, I trained, at a drama school that was really into Shakespeare, and I guess I grew up loving it. And some of my most formative childhood theatrical experiences, was watching things at the Globe and places like that. And I think there's nothing like it. You know, it's what it demands of you emotionally, physically, vocally. I love the challenge of that, and it's so kind of naked and stark. And the language is also, you know, I love having this kind of blueprint from a writer who was writing 400, 500 years ago, and you go, oh my gosh, like, why did he pick that word at that moment? You know, why does he change the rhythm of this line at this moment? It's like being a detective. It's the polar opposite of working on a modern play, where half the time, you know, the writer might be like, you know what, actually, let's just change that line to something else. And there's this kind of like fluidity to the text, which is, you know, also brilliant and interesting. And it's another totally different thing. And that's kind of what we've got in American Psycho. You know, with always, Rupert's always questioning whether a line should change, whether a scene should be shorter, longer. I mean, it's totally changing. It evolves and it's kind of live. But then with Shakespeare, you're trying to get inside what Shakespeare was thinking, but also bring it into the modern day. So there's something about the rhythm of the words that just I find so moving and so exciting. And my ultimate favourite thing with all classical pieces is just like thinking somebody in 1609 said these same words. Somebody walked onto the Globe stage and played Claudio in 1609, 1612. And talk about empathy. I mean, it gives you this like immediate, like intravenous connection to humanity, let alone if you're doing a Greek text that was written 2,000 years ago and you're performing Medea now. It's amazing. And it makes you realise that, you know, we're all on this journey together, where, you know, and we're all humans together. And so I love that about classical pieces.
Yeah. I think it's an amazing thing to be a part of. And I guess, you know, in 21, 26, you know, someone will be thinking that in 2026 someone was playing that part as
Yeah,
well. So
yeah,
it's like an
I hope
ongoing
so.
cycle.
They'll be like, yeah, they weren't great. Hopefully fond memories for people. But yeah.
Yeah. I guess when you're excavating, you know, such rich, complex characters as well, you know, when it comes to the end of a run, do you feel like you're done with the part, or do you feel like there's still more that you want to explore?
Um, you know, when I was at drama school, a great teacher of mine said that performing in a play should be rehearsing in public, and that the moment you sort of stop the curiosity of the rehearsal room, the piece is dead. And I do believe that. It's why I generally don't do very long runs of shows, because I think most of those long running shows, it's really difficult to champion and advocate for keeping things fresh and alive. My favourite bit of a process is the rehearsal period, and I always try and just hold on to that as I go through the run of a play or musical and be like, what else is there here? Like, you know, you hope that if someone came to see the first preview and then saw the last show in a run, that they would go, wow, not necessarily better, but different. Otherwise, if you're just doing it the same every night, as much as there's an art to that, and you want an element of continuity, obviously, it sort of defeats the point of doing theatre, because it should feel live, and whatever's happened to you that day informs how you perform it that evening. And so I suppose I like shorter runs in general. A couple of months is good, but yeah, you know, I think about Claudio now, even though I'm not performing it, he'll be with me for the rest of my life, and
Mm.
so are all the characters I've ever played. You know, sometimes you play a character and you've actually never experienced something that they've gone through, and you're acting it, and then many years later you have a conversation with someone or something happens in your life and you go, oh gosh, you know, I'm in this situation that's a little bit like what that was. And it's funny, you know, it sort of hits a nerve, and you go, oh, I remember this feeling. It was when I was playing this character, and now it's me. But so, you know, I think you can't, even if you wanted to, that you can't really get rid of them. But I also like the ephemerality of theatre. I think, you know, all runs have to end. I think it's why it's odd, you know, not to shit on, you know, these long running shows that go on for decades, but I think it's, it's theatre is designed to end and something else presents itself because it should be born out of the cultural zeitgeist of that moment in time. So, you know, new productions, I think it's, the seasonality of theatre is natural and good and should be celebrated. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're always able to get closure yourself after finishing a run, or does that take more time too?
Um, I, anyone who has worked with me knows that I am a complete emotional wreck on the last day of a run. I find it really hard, and I find it genuinely hard to sort of even get through like a line without sort of just crying my eyes out. I mean, I have to sort of really control myself. And the moment I get off stage, I'm floods and floods of tears. I find it like almost like a kind of exorcism. It's like all of this, I don't know, this sort of sadness of saying goodbye to something, and you know, it's very emotional for me. At the same time, I think I can appreciate that, as I said, I think things have to end, and that is the beauty of these shows, is that if you didn't see it, you didn't see it, and
Yeah.
that's it, and you only get 30, 40, 50 goes at it as an actor. And so I think the main thing is to make sure that you didn't like censor yourself as a performer. If as long as you feel like you gave everything that you always wanted to give, then you can kind of sleep easy and go, which I generally feel like I have done with everything I've done. I can look back and go, you know what, that was my everything for Claudio. That was my everything for, Jamie in the last 5 years. I don't want to add to that because I gave everything I possibly could. So yeah, and then you go on to something else, and then, then it's a new journey. So yeah, but it is a very emotional roller coaster.
Of course. Was it a struggle, when you were doing the last 5 years, doing, multiple runs of that, coming back to it each time, or was that a sort of
Yeah.
like a different experience?
So that, I guess the strange thing with Art of Ears is we were curtailed every time. We had the initial Southwark run that was stopped by the pandemic in March 2020. Then we had the second Southwark run, which was stopped by a lockdown in kind of November 2020. And then we finally got to do, a full sort of 5 or 6 week run in the West End in 2021. And I did every time I felt like I still had stuff to give. I had unfinished business. By the end of the 2021 run in the West End, I think I felt, I had a complete sort of, emotional breakdown in the dressing room afterwards, because, it was such a massive part of my life and kind of the start of my career. It meant so much to me, that character and everything he was going through in his life. But I felt like I'd given everything. I suppose sometimes you wonder, oh, now would I do it like that? Maybe I'd do it a bit differently today. But I felt at a time where like very few people were performing and lots of shows were being cancelled and not happening at all, and being cancelled and then never coming back again. I felt lucky to have 3 stabs at Jamie, and every time I felt like it was better, clearer, stronger, more felt, deeper.
Yeah. I mean, now that you're sort of like establishing modern Oli as well, do you sort of like try to keep Oli Higginson and modern Oli separate, or do you think they're sort of like the one and the same?
Yeah, I suppose like the reason why I'm a performer and a writer and a musician is because I'm not really that interested in being fully public with myself or exploring kind of like all of me. I think I like characters and I like masks, and I think that's actually the best way to examine yourself and your life and other people around you, and to connect with audiences. So I knew that I think, releasing music under Oli Higginson would feel strange, not in a kind of good way, especially because like I'm an actor. That's, I guess, Oli Higginson is an actor, and he plays characters, and Modern Oli, felt like the perfect space to explore all the things that about myself that I was interested in exploring, and particularly, I guess, identity and belonging and relationships and growing up. Modern Oli for me was a space that I could do that safely without it. It's, I always think it's kind of, it is me, but it isn't me at the same time. Modern Oli is entirely me, but it's also something else. And that's interesting. And I can learn more and have more of a dialogue with myself through Modern Oli than I could if I was just Oli Higginson. Like, I don't know what that is. I don't know who Oli Higginson really is, but I kind of know what Modern Oli is, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I'm so excited, to be putting out these songs and beginning my journey with music. It's terrifying, but it's something I'm so excited about and can't wait for people to hear them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. What Ollie Higginson has been so lovely talking to you today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Even you're confused. Am I Modern Oli or Oli Higginson? We don't know.
Is Ollie Higginson
Maybe,
a character? Like,
yeah,
who is the real?
true. I mean, yeah, the real guy is he's in the cupboard over here, locked away. No, it's really good to talk to you, Carlos. Thank you so much. Great
Awesome.
questions.